Welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. The Consul General of Israel in Montreal is wrapping up his 4-year term this Wednesday. Can you imagine a 4-year period like the 4 years that have just passed to be an Israeli diplomat? Let's go to Paul Hirschson, who joins us now on the line as we take a look back at those 4 years. Paul, Consul General Hirschson, thank you for coming to the program.
Elias, it's a pleasure. Lovely to be here with you.
So listen, I have it on good authority. You know, October 7th, 2023, okay, you were actually back in Israel because the Quebec government was opening its new office in Tel Aviv. So let me start off there because obviously October 7th, coming basically halfway through your mandate. Take me back to that time and when you were in Israel when that happened.
So it's 4 years here, roughly divided in half, a little more than 2 years until October 7, and a little less than 2 years since October 7. Two very different experiences. The first half, I worked primarily with the government of Quebec. We get to the agreement and the decision to open a Quebec bureau, an official representative office in Israel. I go to Israel a week in advance because Martine Biron, Quebec's Minister of International Relations, is coming on the 9th. She's flying on the 8th of October, 2023, to come open the bureau. And I go a few days before and make sure everything's organized and hang out a little with my children. And October 7 happens. She's forced to postpone her visit. My son is called up for emergency reserve duty, and I have to find my way back to Montreal. I get back a few days later to a very different experience. Until October 7, the most welcoming, friendly, it still is, by the way, city in the world. Since October 7, there's been a wave of hatred and anti-Semitism from a relatively small minority, but they're loud and they're awful.
So I want to ask you about that because, you know, it seemingly continued over the weekend. There was one incident at the Pride Parade, a water balloon apparently filled with urine, according to one report from La Presse, thrown at some Jewish parade marchers. And then, of course, on Friday, we saw an Orthodox Jewish man attacked on the streets. We can't be 100% sure on motive, but looking at the video and seeing how the perpetrator reacted to the kippah on the man at the end, we can assume, although we can't always assume, but you know where I'm getting at there. Yeah. So it's continued. And so I wonder, what are your thoughts on, you know, the violence, the acts we've seen on Montreal streets over the last 20 months?
I think that both on a municipal level and on a national level, the leadership failed to draw a line in the sand between free speech and hate speech. And the result has been that hate speech has been allowed, not encouraged, but allowed. And that has impacted people. We've had some of the most terrible stuff said in public, which is not legal. It's just allowed. Free speech is cool. You should come to Israel and see the kind of criticism we have about ourselves all the time, voiced on every street corner, openly in the media, wherever you want. Hate speech is a completely different story, and I think that's the primary failure. I will say that this is not true of the Quebec government. The Quebec government has been superb, but the Quebec government doesn't have jurisdiction on the island of Montreal.
Why do you think there's been that failure? What do you think has been behind that failure and governments allowing it to go on?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one of the things that's a little cynical, well, one of the things is electoral arithmetic. How many votes there are on this side and how many votes there are on that side, but the vast majority in the middle not being concerned. But on those two sides, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of political bias and cowardice. I think the biggest component is cowardice.
We're with Paul Hirschson. He's the Consul General of Israel in Montreal. He ends his 4-year term on Wednesday, so we're talking about his 4 years spent here in Montreal. Let me ask you diplomatically how it's been dealing with some of the statements from other countries. I mean, just this morning, there's Australia that says they too will recognize a Palestinian state. This does follow Canada. I have to point that out. Mark Carney making that announcement a couple weeks ago. What's your reaction to that?
not only following Canada, but actually using the exact word for word, the same wording, the same definition, predicated on commitments made, predicated on fantasy. I'll tell you what I think. The truth of the matter is Canada's not really a player in the Middle East, and it would have been prudent to just stay out of it on both sides, not necessarily to come down as the greatest supporter of Israel. That would be okay as well. The moment that France, Britain, and Canada made their pronouncements on recognizing a Palestinian state, that was the moment that the negotiations for the release of the hostages ended. Canada is effectively prolonging this war, unintentionally, I grant you that, but effectively prolonging the war, because without the hostages coming out, there's simply no, or more of the hostages, most have, there's simply no way to end this. And it's a terrible, terrible war, which we desperately want to end. But it cannot end without the hostages coming home.
I want to ask you about the media role and the media's role in all this. Just today there's a story out about an Al Jazeera journalist being killed in an Israeli attack. Seemingly no one mentioning that this so-called journalist was a member of Hamas who on October 7th was gleefully talking about the attack and happy about it. What do you think about how the media has covered your country in the last 20 months?
I don't think there's one answer to that. I think that the media is not monolithic and that there are different schools. We saw, for example, certainly in the first year, in Canada, the French language media was a lot more receptive to Israel's case than the English language media. So there's no one answer. There's many varieties within the English and within the French language newspapers or media. I think that the particular case you mentioned, you talk about, we'll call him a journalist because he was a journalist. He was not only a journalist, he was also somebody who actively launched missiles at Israel. People sometimes have dual careers. I think that one of the real failures here is that the business model of the media has been undermined and challenged by the rise of social media. And now there's a race, not to the finish, there's a race to be first. And there's no fact-checking done by anybody anymore, because if you're more than a nanosecond behind somebody else, you're not relevant. And I think that right now Israel is paying a price for it, but we're all going to over time. Until we get some sort of a business model arising which facilitates the media dealing with this. It's a huge challenge.
Could I ask, because you mentioned, you mentioned specifically the first year coverage in the French media. And I will say I noticed a shift, and the shift continues to happen as the months progress here. Mm-hmm. I'm noticing more of a shift on criticism coming in media against Israel. I want to ask you, because the death toll rises and people are seeing those numbers. So I want to ask you about that turn, that shift, and how you counter that shift.
So two things here I would say. First of all, the death toll certainly is high. There's no question about it. The death toll was extremely high on day one. 1,200 people murdered, most of them in their homes, many of them at a music festival. The death toll is very, very high. The serious people in this subject, what they look at is, it's an ugly trade in blood, I suppose, but what they look at is the civilian to combatant ratio, which is approximately 50%, 1-to-1, somewhere in that region, okay? The lowest civilian casualty rate when compared to the number of combatants killed in modern military history. We know for a fact, we look at Kosovo, it was 4-to-1. At Iraq, it was 3.5-to-1. Fallujah was over 8-to-1. Which some of these are combat zones that Canada participated in. We know that this is the lowest civilian to combatant casualty rate in modern military history, but it's still very, very many people. And there are a lot of images which come out, some of which are fake, but some of which are real. And over time, people are tired. Israelis are tired. We want to end this war. It's the Prime Minister said it just yesterday, as quickly as we possibly can.
I'm going to ask you this to wrap up here. 4 years in Montreal. As you depart, when you get on the plane, when you're leaving Montreal, what's going to be going through your mind?
A whole bunch of things. The superb culinary experience on the island of Montreal. You people are insane. You have so many wonderful restaurants. I will. If you know, I've coined the phrase: if I could relocate the city of Montreal in its entirety to Israel, I would consider leaving Tel Aviv. You have a remarkably good, safe, friendly, exciting, innovative, creative society here. It's really, really a special place. You exaggerate a little bit with the winters, but the rest of it, I don't know if you realize how good a place this is.
Oh, we should put that in our advertising campaign. Consul General, I want to thank you so much for coming on this program. I really do appreciate your time. And
my pleasure. I've enjoyed listening to you.
And best of luck in your next post.
Thank you.
That's Paul Hirschson. He's Consul General of Israel in Montreal, wrapping up his term on Wednesday.